either Slytherin or in the House of Slytherin. For those of you who are listening, that is the sound of Andrew choking on water and trying not to cough it all over his recording equipment.
My expensive recording equipment, yeah.
That was great.
Okay, I'm good.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Okay, welcome back to CineCasters Ultimate Timeline. This is the show where we watch a movie and then pitch it back to each other so that it doesn't suck. My name is Andrew DeYoung, and I'm joined by the bearded and absolutely spectacular Nathaniel Draper.
Ah, thank you. Yes, hi.
Yeah. His beard is spectacular, too. I just want to throw that one in there.
Thank you.
And today we are going to be trying something a little different on CineCasters. We've never done this before. And we celebrated our 10th episode as our last episode. So then I was like, well, let's try doing something a little different. So instead of watching a movie and then pitching it, we took a universe and are now going to pitch an original movie within the rules or, original basis of that universe. And we if this works well, we might try it again with another universe, but we're going to try it with the Harry Potter universe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so partially why we picked this one is because I have an encyclopedic knowledge of Harry Potter, but also because when we did the Fantastic Beasts episode, you were like, I have a lot of ideas about how I could pitch a better movie in general. Now, I don't know, Nathaniel, if you've seen the Fantastic Beasts Crimes of Grindelwald movie?
I have not. I'm actually, admittedly, I'm a little behind on my
that's okay.
Harry Potter cinematic universe.
That's fine. I want you to see it, but have you heard anything about it?
I know that Jude Law plays Dumbledore. I heard that it was actually...
Yes, he does.
I heard that it's a fun movie.
It is a fun movie.
Yes.
It is not a good movie.
Uh-oh. So are you...
Yeah, it's one that I definitely want to do on CineCasters.
I was just going to ask.
There are some great ideas in there, and I really want to talk about it. And we will, but today is not that episode. But,
not today.
But not today. Today we're going to be doing Harry Potter universe original IP, intellectual property. I guess it's not original.
I was just going to say, I don't know if that if that applies, but sure, we'll go with that.
But we'll go with that. So it is...
Y'all know what we're talking about.
Our Harry Potter universe, but our original stories. Mm-hmm. So we don't actually... It's a little different because it's... we have to think... we can't just go in and be like, what are your thoughts to start off? So we are going to do that, but I'm going to do it a little differently because you and I had very different experiences reading and writing Harry Potter. Obviously, everyone has different experiences reading Harry Potter. So I'll start with the question, which is, where do you sit with the Harry Potter universe, both in terms of the original 7 books, the movies, and then the expanded universe, including the Fantastic Beasts? So, what's your fandom? What's your level? Do you enjoy them? All that kind of thing.
Are you asking me to rank my level of fandom for Harry Potter?
I'm asking if when I say Harry Potter, are you a fan? What was your sort of what was your influence and how do you get along with the books versus the movies versus the the new set, the expanded Harry Potter universe?
I see what you're saying. So I was familiar with the stories pretty much my whole life growing up, but I must admit I didn't read them from start to finish till I was actually well into adulthood.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't. I had read some of them growing up, but I didn't actually read all of them. I wasn't a huge Harry Potter fan. I appreciated it. I liked it, but I wasn't I wasn't as big into Harry Potter as I was into, say, Lord of the Rings. I was a big Lord of the Rings geek growing up. And so I just didn't take the time to read Harry Potter. And then years passed. It actually was, my sister was doing a course on Harry Potter at the University of Waterloo. And I thought...
This was in 2017.
This was pretty recently, actually. And then I thought, you know what, I've got to just read all of them. I've been meaning to read them.
I remember when your sister was taking that course because we were filming a commercial together.
Oh, yes, that's right. That was around the same time. So it was that same summer.
Yeah.
I decided I am going to now commit to reading all of them. And
Nice.
that was when that was the first time I had read some of them before, but I'd never read all of them, start to finish. And so I've read them. I quite like them. They're fantastic, phenomenal reads, a lot of fun. And as far as like the cinematic universe goes, I'm familiar with. I mean, I've seen the movies, like the original 8 movies, and not Crimes of Grindelwald, Fantastic Beasts. So that's kind of and then whatever I've read on the Pottermore website, that's basically my level of Harry Potter.
That's pretty good.
knowledge.
Pottermore has a lot of background info, so.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically in preparing for this, and actually in preparing for the Fantastic Beasts episode, I spent a lot of time on the Pottermore website, just going through and doing my own sort of fact checking on a fantasy
I also spent a
universe.
lot of time on the Pottermore website for my pitch as well, because I wanted to make sure like everything was fairly accurate.
Well, the other thing I did when I was on the Pottermore website was I did the test to figure out which house I'm in.
And you are?
I'm Ravenclaw.
Oh, I'm a Slytherin.
I know. You are totally a Slytherin. That does not surprise me.
Yeah. It's okay. My drummer is also a Ravenclaw.
Oh, cool. Well, he's in good company.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask also just about the books, because I know this has been a point of contention in the history of Harry Potter. I wondered if it had any effect on you growing up in a religious household and reading Harry Potter. Was that actually
no
anything?
No, it wasn't actually. My mom read them, and because I remember we were going to read it in class. And I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to read this. And then my mom read it and was like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, your parents are pretty progressive.
Yeah.
So.
No, my parents
and
are
I actually
pretty cool.
remember we read it in grade 3.
Yeah, it was grade 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now anyone listening to this is like, holy shit, these guys have known each other for a really long time.
Yeah, we've known each other since we were 5 years old.
Yep.
That's back in 1997.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. A long time.
God.
Cool. So I wondered if you have like a different experience with the films versus the movies as well.
I'd seen the movies as they were coming out, and so I mean I guess that was sort of how I kept tabs on the story Harry Potter. I think I'd sort of followed it more with the general public. I think that's how a lot of people followed it if they weren't reading. Well, if they weren't reading the books, that's the only other way they could have followed it.
But it was a bit more pop culture-y.
Yeah, exactly. And that was so I definitely seen them as they came out. I think I had seen all of them in theaters, or at least most of them in theaters. But
cool.
My personal speaking of the movies, I know we've talked about this. My personal favorite is Prisoner of Azkaban. And I understand why people are frustrated with it, because it does take some very big liberties. But in terms of filmmaking, it is spectacular how it's done visually. The way that they, like with the time travel sequence, how that's staged, it's just brilliant.
I've been shaking my head for like the past minute.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go into like my background with the book. So, for any readers out there, I am dyslexic and I have ADHD. So I didn't actually learn how to read until I was about 10 years old, which is grade 4, which is quite late. And so in learning how to read, there was a couple book series that really, really got me into it, which includes Redwall, which was a phenomenal series for young readers. Especially the first 2 books are just awesome.
Redwall and Matt Mayo.
No, Redwall and Mossflower.
Oh, okay.
Like, not chronologically. Sorry, those are how they came
the
out.
order they were published. Yes.
Yeah, the order they were published. So those two were just like spectacular books.
Yeah.
And then my mom was reading Harry Potter to me, and then by the time I could learn how to read, the fourth one had just come out, and so when the fourth one came out, I just started reading it on my own. Because, you know, not that my mom wasn't interesting or great, but like I wanted to be able to read, so I learned how to read. So for me, Harry Potter and Redwall were my introduction to the literary world. Like, literally, I wouldn't be reading because of my disability if it was not for Harry Potter, for the fact that I could be like, you can tell these bitchin' stories, and you can read these bitchin' stories if you can read. So a whole world was opened up to me because of Harry Potter. So I have a very, very like sentimental attachment to it in terms of that. But then also it's just a really well written story. I get very excited about Harry Potter. I can quote characters almost verbatim. I can tell you plot events like from books almost verbatim because it's just such an important like story to me. That being said, I hate the films. I hate the films. Now, let me be clear. I think the films do a fabulous job of bringing the world to life. I think the way the cinematography is done and the magic, especially in both Fantastic Beasts and Grindelwald, Crimes of Grindelwald, when you watch the show, watch the movie, you're like, look at these special effects, look at these creatures. Like, it is just a fun time. And Harry Potter, the original 8 movies, do this as well. Like, you're just like, man, like I can feel the impact of the magic. Like, money was spent on production for these, but if you haven't read the books, a lot of the movie doesn't make sense, and I think that's bad filmmaking. I think it's one of the. I'm going to bring another example. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of movies like End Game, Avengers End Game, because unless you know the backstory for all these characters, the movie is just a jumble where everyone's the main character. And they're all doing things, but their personalities conflict. And then there's Thanos, and you're like, I mean, I don't want to go too much down on a tangent, but it's like you should be able to watch a movie as like a continuous arc without asking too many questions about other things.
Mm-hmm. Wait, sorry. Avengers End Game. Is there a new one that I'm not familiar with?
Oh, sorry. Endgame is the one that is coming out.
I meant
Infinity
War.
Infinity
I was
War.
like, have
my
I
bad.
really been living under a rock?
Yeah, my bad. So I don't have a problem. I have less of a problem with sequels because like a sequel is supposed to be the second, but like Endgame is not really a sequel. It just takes place in the cinematic universe. And so if you haven't seen everything... Yeah, Infinity War, sorry. If you haven't seen everything, all the things leading up to Infinity War, it can be jumbled. And that's what I also think about the Harry Potter movies, is especially the 5th movie. If you haven't read the book, a lot of it doesn't make sense. And that's frustrating. Same with the 7th and 8th as well. Now, in terms of the 3rd, the reason I shake my head so much is because the 3rd book is my favorite out of all of them.
Mm-hmm. It's really amazing. It's my favorite book,
too. It has time travel. It has werewolves. Spoilers for a book that came out in like 1997.
That no one has read.
It has time travel.
The movie of.
Yeah, it has like time travel and werewolves, and so a bunch of these things that I really, really like about it. And I think the movie might be shot well, like the way you say, and certainly the way that they show non-paradoxical time travel is phenomenal. But it's not good. Like, there are a few scenes in there where I'm like, what? Like, there's a scene where they're at the Whomping Willow and Hermione grabs Harry's shirt and he has time, and the camera follows him. He has time to do like a full like down, up, gasp, and then get dragged, and the camera follows him, and you're like, oh, it feels like that camera work in particular just feels way too schlocky.
Oh, I thought that
comedic.
was... I love that stuff.
Oh, I mean, like, yeah, I love that stuff too if it's in like a schlocky comedy, slapstick comedy or horror, but in like a... I don't know. It was not my favorite.
Fit with your idea of...
Didn't fit the tone.
The tone, okay.
But, yeah. and also I have a huge attachment to the third one. It's my favorite. So yeah. I mean, books are always better than movies. That's pretty much a given.
I totally get that. Well, here I will give you this. So after I had seen the movie before I read the book, and then after I read the book, I rewatched the movie, and I found I appreciated the movie less after having read the book. But I still went, okay, but I can see, like, it's more of a technical exercise. I think that's why I like the movie. Alfonso Cuarón, who directed it, is, I mean, well, now he's certainly one of the, best directors working. So it's cool as a filmmaker to watch that and pay attention to how the blocking is done in each scene. There's just some really interesting choices that were made specifically in that movie that you do not see repeated, or that same kind of style isn't carried through in other movies, which makes that one stand alone for me as a piece of filmmaking. But yes, I get it.
For me, it was watching I was doing a marathon on Halloween weekend of 2013. I was doing a marathon of all the movies, and there was 2 people in the room that I was marathoning it with. This was when I was in university. There was 2 people in the room that I was living with that I was marathoning with that hadn't read the books, and so sometimes they would ask questions. And I'd be like, "Oh yeah," and then I'd have to explain it. But by the time we got to the 5th movie in the marathon, I had to lay down a rule that was just like, any question you have, just assume it's explained in the book. And that's what sort of made me, because they'd ask a question, like they'd have so many questions, especially in the 5th one, and I started realizing that this might not be a good movie because it's not explained well. Yeah, in the movie itself. Yeah. And so because I had read the stories and they were so much a part of my person that it was just like, oh, this all makes sense because I know the story. But that's not necessarily true, and that's why I don't think especially the 5th is the best movie.
Yeah. Well, it's also I think it's the longest of the books. So to pack that into one movie I think is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think it's probably around the longest.
I think
the 4th might be a little longer.
I think the 5th is actually longer than the 4th.
The 5th one has some problems as well. Like, it's a bit too long in certain parts, but I still love it. Like, when I first read it, I was like, oh, I'm not a fan of the 5th book. But as I've gotten older, I've sort of understood, like, Harry's a 15-year-old, so I can sort of see why he gets angsty.
Yeah, and I think it also makes more sense, too. Is that the one at the very end of it? He, like, just has a total hissy fit and just lays it all out on Dumbledore, and Dumbledore just takes it. Yeah, that scene to me, that's my favorite scene in the book, and I think that scene has a lot more weight to it when you know how it ends.
Yeah. I also agree. When I first read that, I was like, calm down, Harry. But like, then you realize, like, as you deconstruct the books, like, Harry's number one flaw is his anger, and he spends most of the 5th book trying to control his anger. Mm-hmm. And then we even see it come up again it comes up in the 4th a bit, in the 5th a lot, in the 6th a lot, in the 7th a lot. Mm-hmm. Harry's like, he always is trying to control his temper, and so I was like, oh, when I was younger, I was like, calm down, Harry, like, it's not that big of a deal. But I also, when, like, if I'd lost my godfather, who was my one remaining parental figure, I would probably cry, not get angry, but that's me.
Right.
But like, I can totally see like why Harry would get angry. He's mourning, and he's been in this situation where he hasn't been able to like talk openly about everything that's happened. Mm-hmm. He's been keeping his anger within. He hasn't been sleeping well. Like, yeah, I get it. Also, he's 15.
Yeah, and he's been abandoned. Like, he's a kid who's basically struggling with abandonment issues
and abuse. Because they don't talk about it a whole lot. They mention it, but like, the Dursleys straight up abused Harry.
Oh yeah,
in both neglect and malnutrition.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not it's implied, but yeah. And so like, I think Harry has a right to be angry sometimes.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. Well, the other thing too, the reason I like that scene is you look at it from Dumbledore's perspective, and how he's basically he later admits it. He's going, I essentially manufactured this whole situation where Harry
this
has
whole
to die.
situation, yeah. And he really did, because he was not open with Harry about the circumstances of his parents' death and the prophecy.
Exactly. And so
Spoilers.
reading that scene, now, reading it again, that he knows that. So with Dumbledore's in this tricky position where he's like, I want to tell this kid what's going on. I want to be open, but right now I just can't. And so how do I essentially calm this angry teenager down without giving everything away?
And he does. Like, that's the one of the greatest parts of that is Dumbledore straight up takes it, and he's just like, and he's like very emotional, and he's like, I did this, Harry. He says it to Harry in that situation without even telling him the whole end game that we get 2 books later.
Exactly.
He straight up says it. He's like, I put you in this situation because I didn't tell you. He's like, in the first book, Harry asks, why did Dumbledore or Voldemort come after me and my parents? And Voldemort straight up says, that's not a question I can answer right now.
Yeah.
And then in the fifth book, he references it again. He says, you asked me that when you first tangled with Voldemort, and I chose not to answer it. And in choosing not to answer it in your first year, and then your second year, and then your third year, and then your fourth year, now we're here. He even says it himself. Dumbledore even says it himself. When I make mistakes, because I'm a brilliant man, when I make mistakes, they tend to be altogether much more catastrophic than your average person. And it was. I mean,
exactly.
Like, yeah. So I think a lot of Harry's anger and wrath is actually correctly directed at Dumbledore.
It's certainly
Harry just doesn't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that anger is a good way. Well, I think anger can be a very constructive emotion. I don't think the way Harry deals with it is necessarily constructive. He trashes Dumbledore's office.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, there's a way.
I wish they'd played that scene in the movie.
Yeah, I agree.
A bit more weight.
I feel like that scene,
or almost verbatim.
I feel like that scene was really what was at the heart of that book. Like that whole book was to get you to that scene. Because I feel like that scene is really at the heart of a lot of the overarching story, especially the relationship between Harry and Dumbledore. I think it's really an anchor point for that. And it is, it is unfortunately not. I don't really remember how it is in the movie, to be honest, even if it's in the movie.
I think Dumbledore just sort of dumps a bunch of exposition.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a while since I've watched the movies. Actually, it's been since... no, I watched a few of them in New Zealand in 2016. But even that was 3 years ago now, so... Yeah,
it's been a while since I've seen
and it wasn't
the
all
movies.
of them. Yeah. Yeah. So my last question for you is, you were the one who wanted to do the cinematic, sort of, our own original versions of the script.
What was it, me?
Yeah, you were the one who was like, this was way back in the summer, you were like, I have a really cool idea. I want to do a CineMasters episode where we pitch our own like stories within the broader Harry Potter universe.
Oh. Okay.
And or what the Warner Brothers is now calling it, the Wizarding World.
Uh-oh.
That's what it's called. It has its own opening logo and everything to try and compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Course.
Yeah, it's called the Wizarding World. Anyway, it's a neat opening with a bunch of wands and shit, but so you were the one who pitched it, which is fine because you know how I feel about Harry Potter. And at first, when I heard this, I was like, oh shit, what am I going to write about? And I thought I was going to do my pitch on the Salem witch trials.
I thought you were too.
I was, but then I went in a different direction.
Oh, interesting.
And I'll explain why when we get to my pitch. But
okay.
I wanted to ask you, like, when we first came about to do this, we were finally like, hey, let's try this. We've had a couple episodes of CineMasters under our belt now. Let's try this. And then you messaged me like a week later, and you were like, I've got nothing. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about like, what was your process in writing this?
Let me tell you the story. So I'll go back to when I had the original idea to do it as a CineMasters pitch. I had somewhere along the line, maybe in reading Harry Potter, or in watching the movies, I felt like one of the things that was really absent from the way in which the Harry Potter movies were told was the time and place where it happens in the Muggle universe. Now, I don't think it's necessarily relevant to the story, but I started thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if you told the story of a wizard in the wizarding world during the same period of time in which Harry Potter's happening, and you just lace it with all these pop culture references that are dated to the 90s. Because I'm a huge fan of like British 90s music, so I was like, this would be so cool to combine Harry Potter and Portishead and Massive Attack, and wouldn't that just be awesome? So, but the problem is that was my starting point. When I actually sat down to write the story, I went, oh shit, I have no story. I just have. You were like,
I have a concept. But zero actual plot structure.
Basically, I was like, I want to do like a movie. It's sort of like Train Spotting, but in the Harry Potter universe.
Yo, I'd still watch that.
I would too.
Like,
the thing is,
Hogwarts Express Spotting. I'd watch it.
So that was what I tried to do. I tried to start with that, and I started going, there's no story. I have there's no intention, obstacle, there's nothing. There's just this, like, wouldn't it be cool if we basically had a Harry Potter movie with a soundtrack done by Massive Attack?
And the answer is yes, but that does not a movie make.
I may have actually found a way to do that, but
nice.
It took me a long time to sort of figure out what the story was. So, and here's the thing. I'm going to give you a heads up. It ended up being a lot more broad in scope. Like that's okay. It started as a very specific small story, and I have to admit, I don't think you could do it in a movie. I think it would have to be like
be a trilogy,
a mini series.
I'm okay with that too, because I definitely think there's a YouTube trailer for a show called Horrors. It's not a real show. I wish it was, but it's as if there was like a show. I think it's set in America. It could be set in Britain, but I think it's set in America about what it would be like to be a magical law enforcement in today's time. It's a sick trailer. It's a fan-made thing. It's quite well done. It's called Horrors. Definitely check it out on YouTube.
Okay.
Worth seeing.
I will check that out. I'm glad I actually didn't see that before doing this, because mine is sort of like would be kind of a prequel to that, maybe.
Oh, cool.
And that.
Yeah. I'm glad you haven't seen it then, but it's worth seeing.
Okay.
I also wanted to say to mention that I think when we did Atlantis, right after we recorded that episode, we were like, hey, what are we going to do next? And we decided we were going to do this. And within the next 2 days, I already had my script written.
Wow.
Well, not a full script, obviously. My pitch was done. Because you got back to me like a couple days and you were like, I've got nothing. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I'm done. Like, I just sat down for an hour and pooted mine out. So I'm quite fond of mine. But I will say that there is a massive amount of Harry Potter fan-made movies about almost everything.
I could see that
on YouTube. They range from like really, really crappy to quite well done. Anything ranging from this Orders thing that I talked about. There was a fan-made video called Hogwarts 4, the Founders, or something like that, and it was quite high budget, but it had a shitty plot, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. It was about the four heads of the houses?
Yeah, it was about their descendants.
Oh, okay.
It was an interesting idea, but it had a lot of plot holes for the actual story. Like, it was totally non-canonical. Then there was this other one that like sort of depicts the battle between Ariana, Grindelwald, Dumbledore, and Aberforth. It's quite well done because it's and then there's another one that's really, really good that shows Wormtail, Moony, Padfoot, and Prongs and their like sort of last face off with Snape and Lily.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It's also quite well done. None of them are actually canon, but some of them are like, this is really well done and could totally actually, I could see it happening.
Oh, interesting.
The last one I just spoke about is really cool, just because it has like the four Mooney has like James, Lupin, Sirius, and Peter all dueling against Snape, and Snape beats all of them. Like, that's how good of a duelist it is.
Right.
He is, which is, I think, accurate to the shit. Like even though our protagonist is James and Sirius in that story, like, Snape still is like a sleazeball, but he's still a great like dueler. Anyway,
well, he was the only person who was really clever enough to outwit Voldemort. Yeah, him and Dumbledore together, I suppose, but he was able to trick.
He was the one who put his ass on the line.
Yeah.
All right, my dude, why don't you get into your pitch?
All right, I'm going to bring up my notes here. So
I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too. So yes, as I said, it took a while, but imagine this broken up into different episodes. I don't have it broken up exactly how it would fall together, but I have the overarching story.
But you do a TV series. But I wish you'd told me that TV series was a possibility, because you know how I feel about TV. Mine's a movie.
Okay.
It's set up to be a movie.
I wanted to do it as a movie. I tried to do it as a movie, and I felt like the story where I was going, it was just to get the complete thing. It was just going to be it was basically going to be the lives of these characters. So the film.
Let's dive in.
All right. The first episode. The very beginning, the first thing we see is a man in his 60s who's lying dead. He's on a bed, and he's surrounded by a grieving family. And someone standing there, presumably his wife, she's about the same age, is berating someone off camera and accusing her of saying, like, you brought this on us. It's because God is judging us that he is dead, and this is all your fault. And then it cuts over to a young girl who's 17 years old. Her name is Nicola Blunt. And it's her mother who's saying, like, you have to leave. Like, you are not allowed in this house anymore. I let you stay here because of him, but you've brought a curse on our family. And
damn.
Nicola and Patricia not Patricia. Her mother's name is Lillian. And Lillian tries to, like, force her out of the house, and Nicola just brings a wand up and tells her to stay back. Their family backs away. She goes. She says goodbye to her father, and then leaves the house.
Her father is the dead man.
Her father's the dead man.
Cool.
Then she goes and she stays with a friend of hers. I'm going to also give this warning. My Harry Potter is a little darker, perhaps. There's drugs use in it as well.
That's fine.
Yeah. It's sort of, I'm kind of getting out of the family Harry Potter realm with it. So she's like at her friend's house. They're doing drugs. And then, and this is a friend who's a muggle. She doesn't know where else to stay. Her friend's going to let her stay there. But then her friend's boyfriend comes over, and her friend's boyfriend is being a jerk and is actually taking it out on Nicola's friend, and Nicola tells him to back off. He won't back off. He gets violent. She pulls the wand out on him and actually uses some magic to, like, intimidate him, scare him. And then she realizes what she's done, and she obliviates both of them. And then that scene ends. And then it cuts to later. She's on the train on the way to Hogwarts for her final year of school.
So this does take place in England?
It does take place in England.
Okay.
And this is like 80s, so this is just after Voldemort has disappeared. After he's tried to kill...
Yes.
After he's tried to kill... Or he's killed James and Lily Potter. And failed to kill
so this would
Harry
take
Potter.
place sometime between 81 and 91.
Yeah, exactly. In that intervening period. Then it's towards the end of that. Anyway... she's on the train, and then her friend... There's another character named Patricia who comes and sits with her on the train. And they're riding the train to Hogwarts, and then that's the opening for the show, and the show's theme song is "Safe from Harm" by Massive Attack.
You've clearly given this a lot of thought. Yeah. That's awesome.
Anyway, so the story then jumps back and forth between them at Hogwarts and them in the present. I'm saying this for those of you who can't see me.
Quotations.
The quote. The present being like the early mid-90s. And so in the early mid-90s, Nicola and Patricia are now Aurors. and they are actually investigating. There are some wizards. There have been some Muggle-related deaths that they think are dark magic has been cause for it. So they are responsible for finding the people who who've basically been killing Muggles. And this part of the story starts off when Frank Bryce, he's the caretaker at the Riddle House.
Yes.
Who's killed. So they go to investigate his death because there's some suspicion that there was some dark magic that was involved in it. So they're actually trying to find out who killed him. And at first they think it was actually one of these serial killers that they'd been hunting down or trying to catch.
Yeah.
And then when the Death Eaters crash the Quidditch World Cup, then they start going, oh, wait, maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe there's actually a tie-in to something darker that's afoot. So that's the one story of them trying to basically find who is responsible for killing Frank Bryce, which we know is Voldemort, but they don't know that yet.
Yes.
Then it goes back, and then the story at Hogwarts that you get is it's Nicola and Patricia in their final year of Hogwarts, and Nicola has been she's fallen in love with another wizard, and they're both in Slytherin. Nicola and Patricia are both in Slytherin.
Yeah, they are.
Both of them are actually from Muggle families.
Interesting.
Both, and so this is how they connected with each other because neither of them have any wizards in their family.
So they would be outcasts even within their own house.
Exactly.
To some extent.
So they've sort of banded together and formed a friendship. But Nicola has actually fallen in love with another wizard in that house whose name is Remus. Not Remus Lupin, a different Remus. And his family was actually part of Voldemort's cohort.
Ooh.
And after Voldemort disappeared, his family that's in Azkaban, and his family is basically being shamed. And he carries that with him. And he doesn't want to be associated with his family. So he also feels ostracized. But he does harbor some of that ideology of that wizard superiority.
Well, if you're born into it, it's like, I mean, yeah.
But either way, him and Nicola date in Hogwarts, but he's this very angry, disgruntled teenager, and there are some of the teachers at Hogwarts don't like him on account of his family's history, and so he's the target of a lot of bullying. And one day he fights back against some of the students, and it gets very violent. And as a result, he actually gets expelled from Hogwarts.
Oh, damn.
And so after that, he disappears. So that's the one story in Hogwarts. And then the present with them trying to find this serial killer. And in the course of doing this, his name comes up again. This Remus comes up in their investigations. And so they're actually trying to find him because they think he might know who's killed all these people. Or has even been a part of it.
I just have one question.
Okay.
So, is the show going back and forth between like the present and the past?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not all told chronologically. It goes back and forth as required.
Exactly. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. I love shows like that.
So basically, it'd be like, yeah, as you as the audience need to know more about something, it goes back and fills you in. Anyway, so it's them doing this investigation, and then the story at Hogwarts, and then and that runs parallel to the events in Harry Potter. And then that whole storyline essentially comes to a close when there's when the showdown at Hogwarts is happening. There's also something within the Ministry, and Nicola and Patricia are there for that.
So sorry, when you say the showdown at Hogwarts, you mean we've gone all the way to 1998?
Yes, it follows them all the way to
1997.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
which is the Battle of Hogwarts that takes place in book 7 for anyone who's following along and doesn't know the timeline.
Exactly, yeah. So they're working at the Ministry, and they're trying to work within the Ministry. Even when Voldemort takes over, they're actually still trying to find Remus. And what they discover is that Voldemort is actually trying to find Remus because Voldemort wants him back Because they mistakenly thought Ramus was a Death Eater, but he's actually not a Death Eater. And he's actually, he's around, but he's being gotten mixed up in all of this. And part of that was Voldemort was actually just trying to get to him and find him, because he knows that Ramus's family was once with him.
Yeah.
But anyway, Ramus has disappeared. They stop Voldemort, and then we flash forward to the present day. Well, 2016.
Damn!
And in the intervening years, Patricia has actually gotten married to a Muggle, and Nicola is still an Auror with the Ministry, and while the Wizarding world has enjoyed some stability, the Muggle world is falling into chaos. And it takes place around the same time.
Reference to? Yeah, I was going to say, is this a reference to certain socio-political events?
It takes place around the same time as the Brexit referendum.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then you have, within the Wizarding world, there's this new branch of wizards who want to basically take over the world, and they believe that we wizards should run the world because we're not going to destroy it. We don't want our fates tied to Muggles. And they say they're not Death Eaters, but they have a very similar ideology in the sense of wizard superiority. And there are groups of this that are they are disrupting the peace, let's say. And so Nicola and Patricia are having to investigate this again. As they investigate it further, they find that the person who's the mastermind behind all this is Ramus. So then the story at that point just focuses on their lives in 2016 with Nicola and Patricia trying to find Ramus. And through the whole time of doing that, Nicola and everyone's ideals are being challenged. So you have people within the wizarding community who actually support him, because he says, we're not violent. We don't believe in killing Muggles. We just believe that we need to be the ones in charge, because we cannot allow our fates to be decided by their stupidity. And we in the wizarding world have been able to get along. Like, we have been able to build peace. The only time there's ever really been conflict, it's been because of Muggles. There's been because of our relationships with Muggles. So if we can actually control that, and we don't have to be in hiding anymore, and we can be the ones in charge, then we can save ourselves all that trouble. So anyway, that is essentially what would be the last half of the series, is Patricia and Nicola trying to find Ramus. Toward basically in the end, so they actually do catch him, and they bring him to the Ministry, but then there's people in the Ministry who have actually sided with him and help him escape. And so Nicola and Patricia realize that, Patricia wants to do everything by the book, and Nicola realizes no, this guy's actually becoming dangerous, and he doesn't see that he's being dangerous. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but we have to stop him. And Nicola actually goes on a mission to find him and kill him.
Oh, damn.
And in the end, she does. And
oh, damn.
And Patricia knows about it, but they both keep it a secret, and they don't tell anyone.
Damn.
And that's
spicy.
And that's sort of the whole series.
Yeah. I can see what you mean about the scope, because there's so much happening in terms of time frame, you definitely could not fit this all into one movie.
No, exactly. And there's there's 3 timelines basically going on, and the first half of it would be jumping back and forth between the first 2, and then the last half is just the third, which would be our present day.
Yeah, I would even start with a bookend, sort of start with the present day with Nicola and Patricia sort of looking back, how did we get here, and then have that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where every time. If you wanted to do a detective show, I would have it in the present day where they're trying to find leads on Ramus, and have them flash back to them in school, and flash back to them in the 1990s, as needed, but keep it based around the present.
Yeah, and that would work too. I think I was sort of borrowing structurally. I was borrowing a little bit from True Detective, the first season of True Detective, which kind of does this. They're trying to find someone, and then it flashes back. It jumps all over the place, but then the last 2 episodes is like a flash forward to years later.
Yeah, that show is depressing.
It was, and the reason I feel like it was. It wasn't intentional that I was trying to follow it, but I realized at a certain point where I went, "Oh, there is some similarity, even just tonally, with True Detective." But it also makes sense because within the way the Harry Potter stories are written, they're actually they're mysteries. All of them are mysteries.
Yep. And I think well.
One of the things J.K. Rowling doesn't get enough credit for her ability to craft a really well thought out mystery novel.
Yeah,
like Harry Potter, each of those books, when she started writing the crime novels, I went, oh, that makes sense. Like each of the Harry Potter books follow a very similar trajectory. So it would make sense for her to write crime novels. And I read one of them and it was good. It was a good book. So I was sort of, with this, I was trying to take that same spirit of that, like we're trying to solve a mystery within the Potter universe, but it's a little darker. It's, it starts off with them trying to find a serial killer, basically.
Yeah. I would watch that.
Cool.
I would watch the shit out of that.
Thank you.
I might even... Yeah, that's excellent. My only problem with that show is because in 2016, Harry is by then the head of the magical law enforcement. Therefore, he's the head of the Aurors. It means you need a lot of Harry Potter in your story.
So I'm glad you brought that up. This is one thing that I wasn't sure. If I had the time, I would have read The Cursed Child.
Ugh.
And I would have done a little more reading into like the Harry Potter post Harry Potter to just figure out what the story is there.
Post-Harry. Yeah.
To figure
out
a
post Harry Potter list.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if she's written any other stories that would fill in the gaps there.
Yeah,
that would cross over into this.
There's some bits and bobs about like the Quidditch World Cup and the Cursed Child, which takes place in between 2019 or 2016 and 2019, roughly.
Oh, okay.
So 2018, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that was one thing that I because I would like to, if I did develop this further, incorporate those characters back into the story. They may not have a central role in it, but they would be definitely featured in it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's excellent. I would watch that. I the part that intrigues me the most, that I wish was a bit more not to say that there's anything wrong with your pitch, absolutely, but the part that intrigues me the most is like what a magical serial killer might look like.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wish that was a bit more forefront in your plot. Like I want, like, what if they were chasing down like a magical serial killer? What would a magical serial killer be like? How would that work? Like if it was like True Detective.
Exactly. Yeah.
In that way.
That is the next thing that I would have to figure out. And unfortunately I didn't have the time to get into that. But I agree completely. I think that would be really fascinating to explore what that would be.
What that would be like, yeah, like you could have a lot of fun like with like because one of my favorite, I don't really like horror or thriller or anything like that, but one of my favorite parts of that genre is like when you have really, really good, thoughtful, villainous characters like Hannibal Lecter, like Kevin Spacey from Seven, like the kind of crimes that are in True Detective, where you're like, there's something like creepy but also methodical about that. Well, and you're like, oh,
yeah, exactly.
And I think with all of the history and lore in the Harry Potter universe, you could have some wicked fun with that.
I agree. Because where it's interesting is, I mean, you're basically asking the question of like, what drives somebody to do this? Like, you're taking someone who's existing in an extreme, and you're basically through that you're exploring really dark part of the human psyche and asking, like, what is it that would actually lead to someone doing that? And I think that it actually could work within the context of this story. But and it would be a lot of fun if Warner Brothers gave us an advance and we could spend time writing the series. That would be the first thing I would I would do.
Yeah, that was dope.
Thanks,
the
man.
The only other thing that I would change is I don't know if you meant to do this, or maybe this is just me being dumb. I don't want to say dumb, but maybe this is just me. But like, as soon as you mentioned Patricia and Nicola together, I shipped them immediately in my mind.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know. Like, I was just like, I don't know. For some reason, I was just like Patricia and Nicola, or I just shipped them.
Oh,
So,
I see. Like they're both
like they're romantically involved.
Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or that's what I mean by ship.
It could be. Hey,
I think it would be interesting if we kept Patricia married to her husband and she was, heterosexual, but Nicola is bisexual.
Oh, that would be interesting.
And so she's like, she has her relationship with Ramus and whatnot when they're in school, but she's totally in love with Patricia, but never says it.
I like that. I like that
because
idea.
she's like, I know Patricia is heterosexual, but like, and if I said anything, it would ruin our relationship and possibly like call her marriage into question. I know she's not interested in me romantically, and yet we spend all our time together. We do everything together. We hunt serial killers together. And like, I somehow have fallen in love with this person who does not love me back. If you wanted a subplot.
I think that's a great idea, because what was interesting is I haven't mentioned anything about Nicola's personal life. I had an idea where she would like go to visit her sick mother in a hospital. Like, she would try to sort of keep tabs on her family. But in terms of like having a personal life, in terms of what I have constructed, there's nothing there. But that is actually,
I think it would be,
that would actually fit. I think that'd be very fitting to take that approach.
I think it would be,
and very
especially
interesting.
if you have this dark thing where like your main character is like in love with her best friend, and that cannot go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally a dead end. I just think it fits with the dark tone of this like aim you're going for.
Yeah.
Where it's like, even the best, most bestest thing, Dumbledore would say like, the world should be filled with more love, but it's not going to help Nicola.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also think what you did with her family, like where if her family was like deeply religious and distrusted her because of the magic, like even in today's day and age, or like, I guess it was the 80s, but she's like, we can, like her family's like, we can't deal with this occult thing, and the only reason you stayed here was because of your father. And now now it's in the present day, and her mother's sick, and she's like trying her best to like reconnect with her like family, or her like her mom and her siblings, and maybe her mom got remarried, and like now she's like trying to reintegrate herself into this family that like potentially like siblings she hasn't seen in 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like a mother who basically told her to GTFO. And so like, I think there's some really cool personal stuff you could do, especially if it was a TV show. Like you could do some really cool personal stuff with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sort of explore like, yes, maybe Muggle relations are awesome now between wizards and like, not all the wizards do want to murder Muggles, or maybe none of them want to murder Muggles. They just want to be above them. They want to be the ruling class, as it were. But like also personal relationships still matter. Like what's Nicola's personal relationship with her family, and then we can juxtapose that with Patricia's awesome relationship with her husband.
Exactly.
Right? But then you could even say like Patricia has a great relationship with her husband and kids. Right? Except when she says she's a serial killer trying to hunt down a serial killer who does blah 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 spell, and her husband is like, I have no idea what any of this means.
Right.
And so we can sort of get his perspective as well, and be like, he's like, every day you go out and do what is already a dangerous job, i.e. being a detective, a police officer, except there's magic involved, and I didn't go to school for it. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, I work as I'm an IT guy. Yeah, he's like, I work on computers at a company. Like, I'm literally, an IT professional. Yeah, I'm literally an IT professional, and so I think that would be interesting too, because like Patricia, maybe no, because she's a Muggle born, so she would understand how computers work.
That was one thing that I did write into it. They both, Nicola and Patricia, both bond over. This is how I get Massive Attack into it again. They bond over pop culture, so they listen. Yeah. They like bring mixtapes to Hogwarts and play it for people, and people are like, "What the fuck is this?" And they're like,
"You have to be careful with that. You'd have to be careful with that because electronics tend to run haywire in Hogwarts and around too much magic.
Maybe they figure out a way to do that."
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, like, because the wizard wireless is a thing, so I'm sure if you had like a magic radio, you could make it work. But like, yeah, electronics tend to run haywire around magical objects. So if you get an electronic too close to Hogwarts or other magical places where there's high magical concentrations, they tend to stop working.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that detail. That makes sense though, because that's like,
yeah. Sorry, that's just like a background thing that you just.
But I would figure out a loophole to make it work so that they could be listening to like Radiohead at Hogwarts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love Radiohead? Except for the fact that I don't know if this is accurate. Hold on. I need to do some research.
Are you going to say some of the members of Radiohead appear in the Goblet of Fire?
Some of the members of Radiohead are in the Weird Sisters.
I had an idea for like a little throwaway joke. Where they're like, they like bring a poster of Radiohead and they hang it up on the wall and they go, some of those guys look like they're in this other band called the Weird Sisters.
And like have it hung up like next to the Weird Sisters. Yeah. That would be, yeah. That's dope. Yeah. Well done. Would watch that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like, I can always tell when either one of us gives a good pitch because I'm like I get excited. I'm like, oh, I would watch that. I'm excited to watch that. Why can't I watch that? Yeah. All right, I'm going to get into mine if you're cool.
I'm excited to hear yours.
So, as I said at the beginning, I thought I wanted to go into the Salem witch trials and have like a really, really dark one. But when I sat down to write it, I was like, well, I don't know that much about the Salem witch trials. And I don't want to do historical research. Because I'm lazy. What do I know a lot about? And I was like, I know a lot about Harry Potter. Like, a lot. So I was like, what would I write about? And it just sort of hit me. I had been thinking about this for a while, actually, and I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. So mine is an origin story, so to speak, of the Hogwarts 4.
Ooh, okay.
And I know it's been done to death. Like, everyone's got their own ideas. So mine is an origin story of the Hogwarts 4, but it centers around one of them specifically because I think there's a story to tell there. So I'm just going to get into it. So I don't have a name for mine, but like, so the movie opens with the sorting. It's present day. The sorting hat of a new group of first year students. So then the sorting hat gives a poem basically talking about the founding of Hogwarts and how it all began with Slytherin, 4 friends, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Gryffindor. And then the scene shifts with a village in England sometime in the 10th century. In the village, there lives a happy family, and we see our hero. There's a boy of about 14. We see our boy explore the town. He is curious about things, and he spends time with 2 other boys. We see him pull pranks on some of the village folk, but these pranks are sort of strange, and nobody can blame them on him because the way that it's shot, it looks like the young boy is in 2 places at once, which is impossible.
Oh, okay.
But it's shot like cinematographically in a way that makes it appear that that we only see one of them, but like physically,
I
see. Like the laws of physics would dictate that this is not possible for the same person to be in two places at once. But we only see it shot as though it's happening.
But it's like two different locations, but it's like you're filming it like it's two different locations, if I'm understanding correctly, but it's taking place at the same time.
No, it's shot like a single. Like, we only see the single shot of the village or whatever, and the boy's pulling a prank, but the way that it's shot is so that we see it happen as though, like, the prank gets pulled off, and yet when the village folk are like, oh, you know, you pulled that prank, and the boy's like, how could I have pulled that prank? I was here the whole time.
Oh,
like, how?
I get it. Okay.
And it's shot in a way that we see it from the villager's perspective.
Oh, I see.
Like there's no way.
I get it.
But obviously, we know that the child has magic.
Okay, I get that.
That's the implication. So then, you know, he has a good time and he's like fairly jovial. So then we see he sort of goes home and says goodbye to his two friends. He sort of goes home and he sees his father who's selling medicine to the townsfolk. They're happily helping out. He just sells like, you know, physic. It's 10th century England, so. He sells like odds and sods potions and stuff, right? So he enters his home, and immediately he gets reprimanded by his mother, who knows that the boy was behind the prank, and he did it by stealing her wand.
Ooh.
And the boy complains. The boy goes, you know, Mom, like, I wouldn't need to steal a wand if I had one of my own. And the mom says, you're missing the point. Like, don't steal stuff. Like you're being a nuisance, like, you know what I mean? Like, and he's just a kid. I'm having fun, Mom. Don't worry about it. He's like, don't steal. It's not the point. And nobody got hurt. Like, I don't see what the big deal is. So then the father comes in and says, like, to the mother, he's like, the boy should have a wand of his own. And the mother agrees. And the two have a conversation. They say, the mother says she'll go out and she'll find the right wood, and we'll see what she can do. And so she's like, I'll leave for the forest tonight, and I'll make sure that the boy gets a wand. Because this, it doesn't predate Ollivander. Like, I think he came over around that time. He came over with the Romans. But not everyone was using Ollivander's wands. Even like, just some background info, even wizards sometimes hand their wands down. For instance, Ron inherits his brother's wand before it gets broken, and Fleur Delacour uses a wand with her grandmother's hair in it, Vila hair. So, like, Ollivander says the wand chooses the wizard, so sometimes not every family uses a wand maker. They may have their own tradition. And this, so even if Ollivander came over with the Romans, this would still be... There would still be many families at this time who would have their own traditions.
Got it. I see.
So she's like, I'm going to go out and make sure that the boy has a wand. So the next morning, the boy wakes up to a commotion, and he sees in the town square that there are cries of a witch. And then we see the boy's mother in the square, and she is accused of being a witch. Ooh. Devastated, the boy asks what the crime was, and the man calls the boy's name, and he says, I'm sorry, Salazar. She was caught talking to snakes.
Oh.
But the entire time before this, we're assuming the boy is Gryffindor. That's the implication.
This is cool. Okay.
Yeah. So then she's, I'm sorry, Salazar. She was caught talking to snakes, and then they burn her alive. So normally this isn't an issue, except the woman doesn't have her wand on her, so she's actually burned. Normally a wizard would just cast a spell and be like, oh, tickles, right? But the woman didn't have her wand on her. She left it in the forest, and so she's actually burned alive, and Salazar watches his mother get burned alive.
Whoa.
So since his mother was branded a witch, no one will buy his father's medicines anymore, which are actual potions. They're not like snake oil. They're actual potions.
Oh, I see.
Because they're a wizarding family.
Right.
No one will buy his father's potions anymore. Sal's friends will... Salazar, Sal for short, is what his friends call him. Sal's friends will no longer associate with him, and basically life turns miserable. So once the the townsfolk start to leave, Salazar decides he's going to head out and see if he can find his mother's wand, which was left in the forest. So in the forest, he finds it, but it's snapped almost in two. A snake shows up and asks the boy what's wrong. The snakes tend to seek out Salazar. It's normal. Like, he's like, this is normal. The snakes have always sought our family out. And so Salazar tells the snake that his mother's passed, and the snake is also sad. The snake tells him to follow the snake. The snake's like, follow me. And so the snake brings him to a basilisk that lives in the forest.
Ooh.
And the basilisk says, he says that Salazar's mother had once saved its life, and they had a sort of agreement where the basilisk left the village alone in exchange for the fact that Salazar's mother had saved it. Upon hearing of Salazar's mother's passing, the basilisk is very upset, and he freely gives up one of its horns. He says, I'm very sorry to hear this. Take one of my horns. Salazar then finds a snakewood tree with bowtruckles in it. This can just be like a throwaway thing, but bowtruckles, that's the little green thing that Newt Scamander has.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. If bowtruckles live in a tree, it's usually a indication that the tree is wand-worthy.
Okay.
So, he finds a snakewood tree that is wand-worthy wood because it has bowtruckles in it. He takes one of the branches and he leaves the rest of the tree. So then Salazar finds his father crying at home, grieving, and they sit in each other's company for a moment, just quietly. The father explains, after calming down a little bit, that the people who want something and cannot have it will always seek to control it or destroy it. And that is why Muggles will always distrust witches and wizards.
Huh.
Because they cannot have the magic that we have. So that night, Salazar uses the basilisk's horn and the snakewood to make his own wand for himself. Which is canonical, by the way. 2 years later, we see Salazar is older, he's taller, skinnier, shabbier, and altogether poorer. We see him lay his father into a grave. No one else is at the funeral. As Salazar walks back through the village from the grave, the village people talk behind his back about the rumors about him and his mother. When he reaches his home, Salazar lights it on fire with his wand, with the indication being that he has no intention of returning. While traveling, Salazar winds up in a bit of trouble with some Muggles, and he's helped out by another wizard who introduces himself as Godric Gryffindor.
Ooh, okay.
Godric and Slytherin become friends as they travel together. Salazar reveals it takes some time, but Salazar reveals that all that's happened to him and his distrust for Muggle-borns, or mudbloods as he calls them, and how they constantly are groveling for a power that they cannot have, which is magic. Alarmed, Godric aims to show Salazar that he is wrong. They travel together and slowly become friends. So you can have some fun antics here, but basically Godric is like, no. Muggles aren't bad people. They're just stupid. They just don't understand. But Muggles aren't bad people. They're bad wizards too. And Salazar is like, no. If people, humans in general, want something and they cannot have it, they will seek to control it or destroy it, just like his father said. So some years later, I'd like there to be a scene in here where Godric asks Slytherin, Sal, what he's working on while he's writing away in a journal or some such. Salazar is much more introverted than Godric. Salazar explains that he has some ideas on ways that magic is produced in people. So, where does magic come from in terms of bloodlines and stuff like that? So this can lead to some discussions about dark magic that Salazar is interested in, but he's interested in it he's like, I want to know about where magic comes from. I don't care about using dark magic. Just about how magic works. Some years later, the two come across other wizards. A young wizard asks Salazar to take him on as an apprentice because there aren't wizarding schools. So you basically learn what you can from others.
Right.
So he asks Salazar to take him on as an apprentice, and initially Salazar is like, no, I don't know how to teach. I have no idea where to start. But then Godric tells him that the two of them will figure it out together, and they start by taking on one or two wizards. Unfortunately, the Muggles that live in the village where they're teaching find out, and they drive the wizards out and torture a few of the students. In his anger, Slytherin does some powerful magic but is calmed down by Godric. He does some powerful magic, maybe kills a muggle or two, but he's calmed down by Godric. So now it's just the two of them again. And they head off together. So yeah, but they hear of an incredibly clever witch who is teaching in another part of the country, who apparently has come up with a way to deal with Muggles finding out, and so they set off to meet her. So here they meet Rowena Ravenclaw, who has also taken on a few students, but is running out of space. So they ask her, like, we're also running into the problem of Muggles finding out, and it's it's a bit of a deal, big deal. So Rowena says, like, she explains that she has a teaching partner, but her teaching partner has set off to find a place where they can teach without the risk of being found out. And her teaching partner is Helga Hufflepuff.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So Rowena and Salazar get along really, really well. They're both quite curious and quite knowledgeable. While swapping ideas back and forth, Rowena becomes alarmed by how much dark arts knowledge Salazar has. Here, if we really want to go there, we can have an allusion to Horcruxes, like how Horcruxes are made, if we really want to pander. So Salazar explains that studying dark magic isn't wrong. All knowledge is useful. As long as you don't use it to hurt anyone, you can broaden understanding of magic as a whole. Right? Which is, I think, pretty reasonable.
Right,
so,
okay.
And then Helga Hufflepuff can return, and she thinks she's found a perfect place. So in a forest in the mountains in the north of England, the four wizards start teaching, and they call the castle they build Hogwarts. So we can see the sorting hat that's created, and there's also a magic book and a magic quill that keep track of those who should be allowed into Hogwarts. So we can do this through a montage. Some time has passed. So when Muggleborns start appearing in the book written by the quill, Slytherin gets into a heated discussion with the others over the inclusion of Muggleborns in the school. So they compromise. They are allowed to be in the school, but Slytherin will teach none of them. He still distrusts them. I won't teach any Muggleborns. So when the first Muggleborns start to appear, they begin to swell the ranks of the other three houses. So much so that the four begin wondering maybe if they should share the load of teaching rather than only teaching their own students. And so they start to decide to divvy up subjects so that instead of only teaching their house, they will, this person will teach the different subjects, right? Like a regular school. But Salazar says, no, I'm going to teach my own students. And so he continues to teach his own students, which are... So Slytherin House is much smaller, only purebred students, and he only takes the ones that he deems clever and cunning enough.
So I just have a question. So do they... Because there's the sorting hat, but they... each of the heads of the house pick their own students?
No, so like basically the sorting hat would decide which student goes where.
Okay.
And then that's how they would divvy it up.
Oh, okay.
But Slytherin would be like, those who get sorted into my house are only taught by me and no one else.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So then, so one of the first wizards that Godric and Salazar first taught, like way back when they were first asked to take on apprentices, he can show up, and actually now he's a teacher at Hogwarts.
Oh, okay.
So now that they've decided to have more teachers than just the four of them to teach all the subjects, because there are a lot of subjects and now a lot of students. So Salazar is like really, really pleased. He's like, wow, like this is my student and he's now a teacher here. But he still is like, I don't want my students mixing in with the pureblood Muggleborns. I don't trust them.
Right.
So
is that
he's
student?
Very pleased, but
I have to ask, is that student Merlin?
No.
Okay.
It could be, but no.
Because Merlin was Slytherin, wasn't he?
Merlin was Slytherin.
Yeah.
Yes. That's good of you. So Salazar teaches his own students, and he maybe unintentionally, maybe intentionally, he teaches his students to be distrustful of Muggleborns. just because of his own prejudices, I feel like they would start to rub off on his students. He begins doing research into how magic is transferred and where it comes from. So in the process, he makes some great discoveries into how magic and alchemy work. And with the help of his students, whom he's very close with because he only teaches them, like, he starts making these great discoveries. So one of the young Muggle-born students from Gryffindor House can see the work that one of Salazar's students is doing and mistakes it for dark magic because it's, using blood and stuff like that to try and figure out where magic comes from.
Right.
He's an older student, and he accuses her of using dark magic. The two of them fight, and he accidentally kills her. The Gryffindor student accidentally kills the Slytherin student. In a rage, Salazar demands retribution from Gryffindor. Although he's sad by the loss, both of them are sad by this loss. Gryffindor is sad by the loss. He refuses, and the two argue over the inclusion of Muggleborns again. Gryffindor is saying, I told you we couldn't trust Muggleborn, or Salazar saying, I told you we couldn't trust Muggleborns, and Gryffindor being like, this is just a misunderstanding. We don't have to hurt anyone. We don't have to get rid of Muggleborns. And Salazar being like, that's my student that's dead. Like, my student is dead because of a Muggleborn. Yeah, sorry, let me find my spot.
That's okay. I have a question, if I may.
Yeah.
So this distinction of dark magic, when does that, because you'd mentioned earlier that that there's some discussion of dark magic. So is there already some understanding in this? This is also probably talked about in the Potter universe already, but when does this idea of dark magic come into play?
Well, maybe that's a good way. So for someone like Salazar, no magic is dark magic.
I see. Okay.
So for Salazar, he would say something like, all knowledge is worth having, but we don't use it to hurt others.
Right.
But all the knowledge is worth having.
I see.
But for people like Godric and Rowena, they would be like, that's some really dark shit.
I see. For them, there's limits.
There's limits to what should be done. And Salazar would agree. Salazar would say, yes, there's totally limits to what we should do, but by learning dark magic, we may be able to discover what the limitations of and physical laws of magic are.
Right.
So there's no knowledge that isn't worth having.
Right.
But we should be aware of how we use it.
I see.
Yeah. So, but maybe that's a really good question about maybe this is where dark magic sort of starts to develop as a phenomenon.
Right. Yeah. That was my question. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's really, really good. So here we are. So Gryffindor says, I'm sad, but he refuses to let retribution happen. He's like, we're not going to kill a Muggleborn or get rid of the Muggleborns just because one person died. That's just not the way that we do things. And Slytherin, in his rage and sadness over the loss of one of his pupils, starts doing incredible magic. And then the other teachers show up, including Helga, Rowena, and Godric, and they're all against Slytherin. So with his terrible power, he holds his own against them. So we're talking the four of them have this crazy battle, and the other teachers are involved, and Slytherin is just brutally powerful. So he manages to hold his own against them. But finally, with the weight of all the teachers against Slytherin, he is brought down and trapped. So he can be trapped in this crazy lightning prison. And he's started looking crazed, and he's so angry at them, and he says, I am Salazar Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. Mudbloods are a scourge that fills the hall of this school, and taint the magic and knowledge we pass on to those who rightly deserve it. And those who side with them are my enemy, and the enemy of my children, and the enemies of my heir. Enemies of my heir, beware. So then down in one of the dungeons of the castle, Salazar escapes. This is the next morning. Salazar escapes, and he creates a giant chamber way down below the lake. And he places an egg and a statue of himself.
Okay. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Is that from the same basilisk that we've seen earlier?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, it could be, but
because that was when you mentioned the basilisk, that was the first thing that popped into my head was, oh, is this the same...
No, it's not the same basilisk because, but I just wanted to show that the Slytherin family has always had ties to snakes.
Right. Yeah. Well, because the Chamber of Secrets is actually built by Salazar Slytherin, isn't it?
That's what I just. Yeah. So he
exactly.
builds this chamber underneath, and he puts the egg there, sort of as this precaution. He's like, enemies of my heir, beware. So then. So he escapes and he lays this egg. He builds this statue of himself using magic, and then the next morning, just as the sun starts to rise, Slytherin is leaving the grounds, but he's stopped by Godric, because of course Godric knew he was going to leave. He knew he would escape. He's like, Slytherin is way too good of a wizard to be held down. So they have a sort of standoff where they're both pointing their wands at each other, and then Godric lowers his wand, and he asks calmly, he says, "Don't go, Sal. Don't go. Stay. We can make this right." And Salazar turns his back to leave, and Godric pleads with him to stay. But it doesn't work, and Salazar steps into the forest, the Forbidden Forest, and he's gone. So the first student that Godric and Salazar ever taught takes up the post of teaching Slytherin, so he's now head of Slytherin House. But now the four of them, well, the three remaining Hogwarts 4 and the new apprentice that is now the head of Slytherin, decide that Slytherin will be taught just like the other three houses. So it'll be treated just the same as the other three houses in honor of Salazar. So Rowena, Godric, and Helga have a discussion about whether Salazar left a curse, or what the message that Salazar left about a chamber filled with secrets that is meant only for his heir. But they don't find anything, because Salazar is way too clever. So then we transition back to the present, where the Sorting Hat explains that it is through our lack of understanding that creates fear, and we must seek to understand that which frightens us. Otherwise, we risk losing ourselves to that fear and hurting those we care about most in the process. This counts for both Muggles and for Salazar. The idea being that Muggles who can't control magic or understand it fear it, and Salazar, who didn't understand Muggleborns, feared them, and he let that fear control him. And then the Sorting Hat begins with the first student who gets sorted into Slytherin and is welcomed with cheers. End movie.
You know what I really like about that is how you've built this theme into it, which is a lesson that's actually championed by your main character, and yet he fails to learn it.
That's the idea. Yeah, I was trying to go with like he fails to realize that, he wants to understand like where magic comes from. Does it come from the blood, or where does magic come? And this entire time, he wants to basically prove that Muggles are not worthy of magic, and all the evidence points towards them actually being worthy of magic. But he refuses to see it, and he lets that fear of what they did to his mother control him. He lets his prejudice control him.
I think that's really cool. There's only one question I would have about your pitch. I question that there wouldn't be any retribution towards a student who even accidentally killed another student, that there wouldn't be some kind of discipline.
I'm sure there probably would be discipline. That's not the point I was making.
Oh, okay.
The point I was making is like Salazar would it's hard to say because it's just a bunch of notes on a page right now, but if you show it in the movie, I want Salazar to show how close he is with his house.
Yeah.
The other houses are 100 students by this point, right?
Right.
Each. But Slytherin's house is only maybe 20 to 30 students, and he knows them all personally. He teaches them daily, right? And so when we see this older student performing an experiment for Slytherin about magic that looks like dark magic to maybe somebody who doesn't understand what's going on, and maybe there's a bit of dark magic involved in the process of how it works in order to make it happen, but it's not hurting anyone. And then this fight can break out, and I feel like because of this, again, we can build the theme in there, because there's this sort of seclusion between the Slytherin house being taught by their own teacher and being separate, that they might be a little bit elitist.
Yeah.
And this sort of, that prejudice would pass on from Slytherin to them, and so they might think that their house is better than the others, as you do, and I mean that's just a natural part of competitiveness.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And except there might be this elitism because they only get taught by Salazar.
Well,
then when
go ahead. Sorry.
When this fight breaks out, like she dies accidentally, of course, and then Godric would be like, "Yeah, of course they're going to be punished," and Salazar would be like, "No, my student's dead. Your student dies, or all the Muggleborns leave. That's how we're doing this." And his prejudice clouds his judgment.
Right.
And then that's where this fight happens, where Salazar's like, we can't keep doing this. So sorry, go on.
I was going to say like that actually could make more sense. Like if there was a way where you could, like maybe Godric Gryffindor says like, no. Like, yes, there will be discipline, but it will be on, I will choose to discipline how I think is fair. And I'm not going to kill my student.
Yeah,
and Salazar goes, but this is not.
They're my house. Yeah,
exactly.
They're my house. We decided I would deal, like each person would deal with discipline in their own house. So like I would hope you wouldn't kill one of your students, but Salazar would be like my student is dead. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? Like this is a Muggleborn. I told you this would happen. Mm-hmm. And Godric Gryffindor is like, we're not gonna kill them, Sal. Like that's not how we do things here.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that works a lot better. And then Salazar's conflict where he's getting angry is because he feels that justice has not been served on equal terms.
Yeah,
and that would create the rift.
Yeah, and we could even show that student is completely remorseful.
Exactly, which I'm sure they would be.
Yeah, I think they would be too, but obviously Salazar is just like, this is just another Muggleborn, trying to crush out, or even in this case, they saw the experiment happening, and they just assumed it was dark magic. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They didn't understand what was happening, and therefore wanted to control it or destroy it.
Right, exactly. And they were acting out of their own. They were acting out of their own fear. Yeah,
they were acting out of their and now their own prejudice, and now Salazar is acting out on his prejudice, his own fear. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I am really quite proud of this pitch.
It's good. It's a good, solid story. I think you answer a lot of questions in terms of, I think it's a very solid origin story in terms of telling the story of how Hogwarts came to be.
Yeah. I like that
you chose Salazar Slytherin as your main character. I think that
I was just going to say, Salazar is actually both the good guy and the bad guy of his own story.
Exactly.
And I really, really like that. And I also thought he was the most interesting. I was like, what drives a person to hate something so much? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I want to explore why Salazar Slytherin has this, another 1,000 years of prejudice is based on the teachings of Salazar Slytherin, right up until Harry Potter. Why is there this prejudice against Muggleborns?
Exactly.
Let alone Muggles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to explore that. Also, I think it would be fun to go back to the origins and just see some of that shit go down.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot going on there. And you have a lot of opportunity for exploring the world in a different period in time, which would be something that, as an audience, we haven't seen before in the Harry Potter universe. I knew I wanted to base it off of a story we knew, mm-hmm. but go into detail about how does this story come about, and how do these 4 seemingly disparate characters with different features come together as friends. Mm-hmm. To create Hogwarts, and then all of a sudden have Slytherin be like, peace, bitches! There's got to be more to it than that. There's got to be more nuance. So I wanted to explore that sort of interpersonality, where you see Godric and Slytherin are really good friends because Slytherin house and Gryffindor house are 2 sides of the same coin in a lot of respects, and we actually see that in the books. They say that a lot. Harry would have done, admittedly to himself, he says he would have done well in Slytherin. He has a lot of the features that Salazar himself would have thought great. And I think
Godric would have also done well in Slytherin himself. Like a little bit of recklessness, disregard for rules, cunning, intuitive, ambitious. Like, these are Slytherin. The biggest difference is that Gryffindor would say loyalty to your friends always first. So that's it's our decisions that define us, not our, not which house we're in.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Yeah. I also like that both of our stories involved characters who are Slytherin. Well, like, both of our stories, like, our main characters, you picked Slytherin, and the characters in mine are in the house of Slytherin. I just thought that was funny.
I always feel like Slytherin gets a bad rap.
It does.
And this has been talked about even within the books themselves, but I am a Slytherin, and I think there are some really, really good features about being Slytherin. So even in the books, like, there are some characters that are Slytherins that are good guys. Snape is not a good example, and I don't like bringing him up, but Snape turns out to be a good guy. Still a douchebag, but he's a good guy. But Regulus, that's Sirius's brother, also turns out to be a good guy and is in Slytherin. Slughorn. Yes, Slughorn is a bit of a, like, creepy old uncle who, like, wants to collect people. Also turns out to be a good guy, though. He fights for Slytherin. Malfoy, to some extent, not a great example because he's a bit of a coward, but, like, still turns out not to be a total douchebag. And then Albus Potter, Harry's middle child, turns out to be a Slytherin and is a good guy. Malfoy's child, Scorpius, is a Slytherin and is not, like, very much not like his father at all. And actually in Cursed Child, I know Cursed Child is problematic, but in Cursed Child, we actually see Malfoy and Harry eventually do become friends. Sort of. Like, circumstances sort of put them together where we can see, like, these are two people who have a lot in common, and their history kind of keeps them apart rather than their actual personalities. Like, you can see that they would potentially get along.
They're not, like, best buddies, but they've put their differences aside.
Yeah, and we could see that, like, had history played out different and Malfoy's family, Draco's family been different about how they dealt with Voldemort, there could have potentially been friend there. I think ultimately Draco Malfoy is a product of his privilege.
Yes.
He's a single child of two wealthy parents who basically are wizarding royalty to as much a degree as that still exists in the 1990s.
Right.
And they have a history with Voldemort, and Draco, being this privileged little shit when he's in school, thinks, like, this is the natural order because my parents were a part of it. But when he sees how Voldemort treats his father and other people, Draco is like, oh shit, no, this is not cool. Mm-hmm. He's just not brave about it. He's a little shit about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's how it is.
Yeah. I always thought he was just someone who just wasn't... It took him a while to figure out really what was going on. And by the time he figured out what was going on, it was too late, and he was already in too deep. And also because of the family ties.
Yeah, I think Draco could have potentially had a really, really cool redemption story. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of see a redemption story happen for him, but it's much more passive. It's like he is not actively trying to take Harry down anymore. He's just trying to save his own skin.
Yeah.
But I think, like, you could have had, like, a sort of a hero's redemption. Could have happened for Malfoy in a potentially other CineMasters pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my Salazar Slytherin. Oh, and Merlin. But Merlin wasn't in the books. I tried to keep, like, in the books. Yes, Merlin was also a Slytherin. So, and me, I'm a Slytherin.
There you go.
Oh, also Lita Lestrange. I know you haven't seen it. Speaking of which, I wanted to say your pitch has a lot in common with Crimes of Grindelwald in terms of the way Grindelwald talks, like his rhetoric. Has a lot in common with your Remus character. You should really watch that because it's very similar.
See, that's interesting.
Lita Lestrange is in Crimes of Grindelwald. She's mentioned briefly in the first Fantastic Beasts.
Okay.
She is a Slytherin and is a total badass.
Okay. I
don't want to spoil it for you, but I'm going to spoil it for you.
I'm going to check it out. But go ahead.
she essentially gives herself up, like she dies to save Newt and Newt's brother.
Okay.
Like, so that selfless sacrifice, but she's a Slytherin.
Okay. Good for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
I'll have to check that. But it's interesting because the Remus character was actually based on, I was taking some of the ideas I had for the pitch from Fantastic Beasts, where I felt like this is, because I felt like this is sort of where they should have gone with the Grindelwald character and didn't quite. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just sort of take that and use that with Remus.
There's a whole scene where a lot of what you were talking about with, like, we need to not kill muggles, but sort of control them so that we don't lead to more stupid shit. In this case, World War II, because it takes place in the 1920s. So in this case, like, Grindelwald is like, if we leave them unchecked, another world war is going to happen. And Kowalski even says, no, not another war, because he
fought in World War One.
He fought in World War One, and so, we even see like a little foreshadowing to the atomic bomb, and the wizards are like, oh shit, like it's not magic, but that's some incredibly destructive power.
Right.
And so Grindelwald actually is quite compelling. I was very wary of Johnny Depp, but like he is surprisingly good.
Right.
It's worth watching. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down
for the greater good. That's my,
no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go too far down into that, because I definitely think we should do that movie on CineMasters.
Okay, I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good, because that is all for today.
I think we're out of time.
I think we are out of time. Any last thoughts?
No, that was fun. Let's do that again.
That was excellent. I think this really, really worked, trying our own approach. I definitely think we'll do it again in another 10 episodes, I guess.
I want to see your movie, and I want to see my TV show.
I want to watch your TV show, and I want to be on the writing team behind that TV show.
I want you on the writing team for that TV show. And I want to make your movie, because I want to see that movie too, because I think that
I want to see that movie too. I think that would be so dope. Yeah.
Can I direct your movie?
Yes, please. I also want Tom Hiddleston to play Salazar Slytherin.
Ooh, yes, please.
I think that would be so good.
I mean, I was on board before, but now I'm like way on board.
Tom Hiddleston as...
I totally see that. That would be...
Right?
That works, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or David Tennant, but I'll watch anything with David Tennant.
Yeah. I think Tom Hiddleston's
a great David choice. Tennant as Godric Gryffindor.
Ooh.
And Tom Hiddleston as Salazar Slytherin. Would watch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
There's my dream cast, but not the system. Not the gaming system.
I was going to say.
Yeah. All right, dude. I think that's probably good for CineMasters this time around.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us on CineMasters. You can check us out on YouTube and on Facebook. You don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're looking for Nathaniel, he's on Twitter at
Nate Draper.
And on Instagram at
Draper Nate.
And if you're looking for me, look for my band, Robot Philosopher. We're on Instagram, Robot Philosopher, Facebook, Robot Philosopher. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
Bye.